It always feels good when beautiful people come together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's a real honor and privilege to get to have you here and get to share and listen and learn your stories.
And it's an honor and privilege for me too to be here, and I just love the company of plant people and everyone that's involved in the healing arts. It's like everybody I meet along those lines is incredible. You know, it's like there's so much heart, and everyone just wants to help and, you know, lift the world up. So I always feel thrilled when these groups get together, and I hope I get the opportunity to know each of you. Now, how this all happened, I'll start there. We have the Herbal Roundtable here once a month, and the Herbal Roundtable will be here later after this, and we get together for a couple of hours to basically for extended education. We play a game that I invented, and it requires everybody to develop their critical thinking skills and be put on the spot about how different things are connected together in a way that is going to earn them points. And it's a good skill to develop when you're actually working with people, and all of a sudden you've got something coming out from the thin air that you have to think about and take action on, and instead of having the gears grow rusty and we grease them through the round table where people just get used to trusting what they know and discovering what they don't know, what they do know, and it's very fun and we have a good time. So we were together a month ago, and I don't think most of you know Maria personally, but I'll tell you, she's a force to reckon with.
Cheers.
Now, most of my adult life, people have been telling me that I need to write a book, and I don't want to write a book. So I'm very evasive and come up with wonderful excuses for not writing a book. But last month, Maria leaned forward in her chair and looked at me and said, "When are you going to write a book?" And everybody was sitting around waiting for an answer. So I knew that I couldn't get away with it any longer, and she suggested that we do this where I tell the story orally, it's recorded, and then transcribed in the book. Right? So that's what we're doing. And so you're here for part one of the oral story that will ultimately become a book, and we're going to do a series of these because it's a long story. And I have a little bit of irritation in my chest, and so if I all of a sudden jump up and run into the other room to take my lobelia, everybody, lobelia is the thing. If you have hypersensitivity in your bronchi, whether you have asthma or anaphylaxis, this stuff is incredibly effective at relaxing that down quickly. So I just want you to know that I'm prepared, and I hope you are too. So moving right along. Do you guys know where the Hurricane Wilderness Preserve is, or have you heard of it?
I looked it up, but I've never been there.
Okay. It's probably the least known wilderness preserve in Arkansas. It's probably the most rugged wilderness preserve. It's 15,000 acres inside the Ozark National Forest. It is where the mountains are very close together and steep. Narrow valley, the Hurricane Creek. It's called Hurricane because when it rains, the water comes down off mountains, fills that thing up, and it is churning. A Cat 5 scale for kayakers. And so it's a tough wilderness, and that's where I wound up living for 10 years. And I will tell you more about all of that as we go along. One of the things that people have always asked me is, why did you go to the wilderness? And so we're going to start there today. I'm going to tell you why, how, all of that sort of thing, give you the background, and hopefully get you to the point where I'm actually in the wilderness and some of the first things that happen. Now, this story is not just about the wilderness, because it really deals with the whole tapestry of my life going all the way back to, for example, when I was 5 years old, and my brother and I had a life-threatening illness, and there was a battle in my family between my grandmother and great-grandmother, who were from the Ozarks, herbalists, and my mother, who, like so many, thought that modern medicine was the answer. And which way was it going to go for her kids? Was it going to be the doctors or the granny women? And of course, the word was that granny women didn't know anything. And so there was a pitched battle going on that, as a 5-year-old, I was very tuned into. And I heard about the prognosis for me and my brother, and it was basically a life-threatening kind of a deal. Like, if you don't do the right thing, these kids are out of here. I decided that my grandmothers were right. And fortunately, they won over on me, not on my brother. And that started my lifelong journey with herbal medicine, that through thick and thin and a whole bunch of detours I've stuck with, because it works. And I love learning about it, and I love the plants. And it's like, how can you just not keep herbal medicine in your backpack and, close to your heart all the time? It's there when you need it. But the story includes other things. A lot of the theme, I've noticed that there's like a theme kind of that has run through my life that has a lot to do with the fact that this world isn't what it appears to be, number one. We're not what we appear to be either. And miracles happen. So especially when we're up against a corner and things are really, really dark and really dangerous and there is no way out, we can have the most extraordinary things happen to get us out of that situation. And so that's why I think the book is important. It's like, I'm not doing this for me. I already know the story. And I'm totally involved in the herbs and teaching and, doing that work. I don't need to be bothered with writing a book. But I realize, this is something that has to be done for others. Because, number one, I've benefited from the stories of my teachers and the books I've read, and it's been so important to me. And number two, a lot of things that happen to me, when other people hear of them, I think that it will help remind them and inspire them to look for the good in every situation, and that no matter, it gets to be a bit of a cliche, but no matter how desperate things may seem, we can come through it and actually sometimes be thankful that we had that experience. So it's really as part of the healing work, there's the whole long story. And just to give you an example of some of the places that we're going to go, imagine yourself home alone, in bed, out in the country, no neighbors. This wasn't in the wilderness. And you wake up with a butcher knife across your throat and a deep voice telling you that he's going to rape you and kill you. That's one. I think people would be very interested in how that turned out. Imagine another one where in broad daylight you're kidnapped by the mafia. Imagine another one where you go with Albert Violdo to Peru to apprentice in shamanism with his teacher, the Wizard of the Four Winds, during the Shining Path Revolution. Another one that people I think will be interested in hearing is when I died from strychnine poisoning in New Orleans and was with a Tibetan Buddhist who decided not to take me to the hospital when he saw I was dying, but to take me through the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thadal. And so there's just a whole lot of story in all of this that has to be told. But we're going to start with the journey into the wilderness, and we're going to stay on that journey for a while. I'm sure there'll be stuff in the book that's not going to be in the oral, because I'm going to be leaving out all kinds of goodies that I'll stick in there later. So the story begins when I'm in Los Angeles.
Go in the desk. Get the desk, get the microphone. Just go to the desk, to my desk. Sorry. Right
Was
there.
that Mary?
Freedom. I'm sorry. I just want to get you the microphone. I just realized I don't want you to have to yell, but you're about to tell this story and I want it to be captured on the microphone. I'm
Okay.
really apologizing.
No. We want this to work, right? And it gives my voice
Exactly.
it gives it a little rest. I can feel that little dryness.
Is the tea helping?
I'm good, yeah, but I think I'm just going to do it.
I thought I had it all. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you have somebody else help you. And it's always done for you.
Okay, are we good to go?
We're good to go.
All right. So I wound up in Los Angeles because my passion was music, and I was a musician. I was in a group, a small group of 3 people, and we had other musicians playing with us, and we were going for the big record deal. So we had to be in LA. Our manager was, it was very promising. Our manager was known in LA as Golden Years because he was the manager of Fleetwood Mac and Stray Cats and people like that. And we had a lot of people like one of our drummers was Chet McCracken from the Doobie Brothers, and it was a happening thing. But I needed a day job, as musicians often do. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have a day job, I think it's good to have it in the entertainment industry. And there happened to be a temp agency in LA that specialized in the entertainment industry. I had a great agent. I loved it because I only worked when I wanted to. If I was recording, I could take the time off perfect. And so it was so odd what happened because I've always been trying to figure it out, but through that, I wound up working at the very height of the industry. And I'll tell you more about that in another chapter. But one of the things that happened was, well, I'll tell you a little bit about this story because it's kind of fun. I was working with Stephanie Elaine. We just finished up Boys in the Hood, if you know that movie. And one day she called me into her office and she said, Wendy Feinerman wants you on her team. Everybody knew I didn't want a job, but Wendy Feinerman wants you on her team. And I said, who's Wendy Feinerman? And and see, that was typical of me. I didn't know anything about the movie industry or television or the movie stars or who was who, and I didn't care. And they loved it because they knew I didn't want their job. And so anyway, she says, Wendy Feinerman's married to Mark Canton. And I said, who's he? Well, he's the chairman of the board, the CEO, or the chief executive officer of Warner Brothers. And he's coming over to Sony because he's going to be the CEO of Sony Studios. That's where Columbia and TriStar and all these, it's a huge production studio in LA. And I think it would be really good for you to take this job. And so anyway, I said no, but then they kept after me, and finally I said, well, I'll try it. And I went to see Wendy, and all these people wanted that job. I didn't have a resume, so I just wrote a list of people that I worked for on a legal pad and gave it to her. And she wanted me to work for her, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do it on a trial basis. Let's just see how this works. And so the deal was done, and it was really a sweet job. A little while into it, we got the script for Forrest Gump. And so we decided to do that movie. Now, the executive producer is the one that gets the script up to par and gets the money for the film and finds the stars, overseas, gets it all, the whole package together. So I was involved in all that and got to hang out with Tom Hanks and all that sort of thing, and I love him. He's really a sweet guy. But I think just to kind of get things rolling, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my life at that time. If there was a lineup of people, 100 people, and you were told to vote on who was the least likely person to go to the wilderness, and God forbid they went to the wilderness, who was the least likely person to survive the wilderness, everybody would have voted for me. I can tell you that is for sure at that time. So let me just pull out a couple of pictures here. Okay, this is just to give you the flavor of my lifestyle at that time. In this one, I'm the one in the braids. This picture is when we got the Oscar for Forrest Gump, and I'm in the picture with Wendy and all of that. So at any rate, while all of this was going on, the band fell apart. Interpersonal conflict. And I left the band, and so here I am with my day job and getting the Oscar for this movie. But it's not anything I wanted to do. I had no ambition for that at all. And I figured, okay, once you get the Oscar, that's it, right? Don't keep going. It's like, it's going to be like that. And I thought, it's time for me to stop. Well, meanwhile, I had a really cushy lifestyle. I was living on the estate of a wealthy friend that was actually a botanical garden. People like Charles Bukowski, who we called Hank, his famous poet, used to come over, and Marcello Mastroianni and Bon Appetit used to come over to do their photo shoots. It was a fabulous lifestyle, full of art, the finest cuisine, the best clothes, all of that. And I had a close circle of friends called the Moon Circles, and we were all in the entertainment industry together. The Moon Sisters. We always got together on the full moon no matter what, and celebrated and rose energy up together. And one day, one of them, Laura, put us into absolute shock. She said, I have to tell you something. I've just bought land in Arkansas, and I'm going to move there. Now, we all had the same reaction. We don't know Laura. We thought we knew Laura. Who is this woman? All we knew about Arkansas was the stereotype. Isn't that where it's like just all the hillbillies and, everybody's drinking moonshine and it's the rednecks and all the Bible Belt, and Laura's going, and guns, and Laura's going there. And she disappeared. We never heard from her again. We weren't surprised. And, we tried to block it out of our minds. People do crazy things sometimes, right? And so that had happened. Yeah, I don't know if they can see him, but you could try.
Right here.
But meanwhile, I said I'm done with this day job. I'm going to have to downsize because now I don't know where my money's going to come from. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I can't afford this anymore. And what I really want is time to reflect on what I'm going to do next, because I always want to work with passion. I always want to be doing something really meaningful. I don't want the strategy of where I'm going to go get a day job just to keep a roof over my head. And so I got a part-time job. I got rid of my car, too expensive. I moved in with Renee Taylor, who I'll tell you about another time. Incredible woman. She knew Rasputin. She knew the Archduke Ferdinand. She was amazing. Brought yoga to this country. A whole bunch of stuff. More about her later. I went to live with her rent-free. Had a part-time job, 3 days a week, 4 days to figure out my life. So there I am trying to figure out what am I going to do. What's my passion? I don't have the money to start a business. I don't have the money to put an ad out for being an herbalist. It's like I'm totally at square one. And I couldn't really grab on to anything. What I was really loving at the time was meditation. I was an avid student of Buddhism, initiated into the Kagyu school. And I was thinking, well, what I'm really loving is my study and practice. So maybe I'll go to a monastery. But I ruled that out because I couldn't decide on which brand of Buddhism I would want to devote my life to. And so then I remembered this wonderful piece of advice, which I want to put out to everybody. When you don't know what it is you want to do next, or what's really important, imagine yourself on your deathbed, and I'm sure you've all heard of this one. And what is it that you would regret not having done? Maybe that's what you need to be focused on. So I did that, and lo and behold, the one thing that I knew I would regret was not going to live in the wilderness. Because ever since as a young child in school, when they would ask me, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a teacher or a nurse or a housewife? Those were the choices back then. I would give the right answer, but then I would think about it, and I always saw myself in the wilderness. But I could never figure out how to pull that off. And life was always getting in the way. So I went, well, okay, I'm getting older now. If I don't do this now, I'm not going to be doing it at all. So it's got to be the wilderness. But there was still the problem about how to do it, how to go about it. I didn't have a car to drive to the wilderness. I didn't have money to buy camping gear. I didn't have primitive skills. I didn't have the right clothes. I didn't know which wilderness to go to. I didn't want to starve to death in the wilderness, to be eaten by bears. I had a long list of all the reasons not to go to the wilderness. And I thought, okay, what are the good reasons for going to the wilderness? Okay, so first of all, I knew all about genetically modified plants and how we were losing a lot of the heirloom plants because of the pollen drip from GMO. And I thought I could get all these heirloom seeds, especially the corns and all that, and I could go into the wilderness and grow them out and save the seeds. And there would be finally like a seed bank of all this important seed that's not being contaminated. That's important. Next, I could put some things to the test. For example, we've always heard that the indigenous peoples learn about what plants do from the plants themselves. And I thought, I would like to know how to do that. could I learn from the plants directly? And I thought, if I could, the wilderness was the place to go. Next, I didn't really know how to identify plants. I'd always bought my herbs or grew the few that I knew. I thought, I will learn how to identify plants in the forest. Next, more was philosophical. I really want to know if the universe is friendly. I'm the one that was voted the least likely to go to the wilderness or survive if they go there. So if I go there and survive, it's only because the universe was friendly. And I thought, I'm willing to put that to the test. So that was another good reason. But then, alongside that, I realized, and that's about the wilderness, I realized I really do have a passion for getting out of LA. I did not want to be there at all. I'd been in the Northridge quake. I had been in the Whittier quake, and from the Whittier quake I learned that it is not a good idea to run outside buck naked when you live right across the street from ABC television. But you don't think of things like that. And in the Northridge quake, that was the big one where all the freeways fell and buildings fell and all that, I discovered that I could literally fly, like from my bed sound asleep, across the room into the closet in 1 second. And that was exciting and fun. But the whole earthquake thing was very real to me. I felt like the whole city was turning into a police state. There were so many laws and regulations that you needed to check your legal file to see if what you were doing was legal, and it could be just about anything that wasn't legal at all, and you would never guess in a million years. I knew that water was going to be a problem in California in general and LA. I felt like LA was going to go down the tubes and I needed to get out of there. So here I've got a passion for leaving LA and a discovery I'm going to the wilderness. But I have no clue about how to do any of it because I am stuck. And really stuck. No money, no car, no nothing. So I remembered another piece of advice, which is two pieces of advice. You're trying to figure out how to do this thing, and that is totally premature. You haven't even made a decision to do this thing. First, you have to make the decision, and then the way will be opened for you. And I had learned that from one of my fabulous teachers, who you'll hear about another time, Dr. Elizabeth Kaspari, who was involved with Charles Fillmore at Unity way back in the day, and she taught me how to manifest. And there were certain rules about manifesting, and one of them was, it's not your job to figure out how to do something. Your job is to be the channel and have a clear vision and make the decision that you're going to take responsibility to do this thing, and then everything else will come into play. So I went, yeah, right, I've been having all these reasons why this can't happen because I'm trying to figure out how to go to the wilderness. How stupid is that? I made the decision. I could feel it in my body. When you make a decision, you feel it in your whole body. You know it. You're not thinking about it anymore. You know it. And so I got to that point where I know it, and I went to sleep that night and had a lucid dream. And in the dream, I was flying around looking for the wilderness I was supposed to go to. Flew over New Mexico. There was like a kind of a voice that was with me. Flew over New Mexico and I really liked it. And the voice said, no, keep going. There's going to be too much fire and stuff there. So I kept flying. And I found this place that was really this gorgeous valley, so pastoral, and I'm flying through it. And everything is just, it looks just like a Renaissance pastoral type landscape, and I just fell in love. And this voice thing told me, this is where you're supposed to be. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about not knowing it. That was another problem. I didn't know anybody who wanted to go to the wilderness with me. Don't worry about any of that. Everything's going to be taken care of. This is where you're supposed to be because you're needed here. And I'm taking Lobelia for my dry throat. Everybody Lobelia, it's the bomb. Just don't take too much. So I said, well, okay, that's great. Where is this place? And it said, Arkansas. And so I thought, Laura's in Arkansas. Nobody knew where Laura was. By the way, she was also a photographer, a nature photographer for things like Sierra Club and Natural Geographic and all that kind of stuff. So she had sort of a right to go to the wilderness with that background. Anyway, I got up and went on the computer to learn about Arkansas. I discovered that it was indeed a magnificent place. For if you're going to live in the wilderness, Arkansas is one of the best places to live in the wilderness. The biodiversity for an herbalist is incredible. And so I thought, okay, what I'm going to do, and now the guidance is starting to come in, and I'm just in flow with it. So I'm, you could say I thought, but who knows who was doing the thinking. I thought, I'm going to look for communities in Arkansas, because I didn't want to live alone, especially in the wilderness, my first time being the one that's not likely to survive. And so I found there were only 2 communities at that time, Heart Song, which is a Sufi community, and there was another one that was called the Valley of Light community. And I love the Sufis, but I didn't want to commit to that, for my life. I looked at the Valley of Light, and lo and behold, it is smack dab in the middle of a wilderness. The Hurricane Creek Federal Wilderness Preserve, not on the edge of a wilderness preserve, in a federal wilderness preserve where there's no roads, there's no cell phone, there's no nothing there. They're trying to keep people out. It's pure wilderness. And in the middle of it is a community. And I checked that out. And I got in touch with the guy that owned it. And it was this fellow that people probably know of in Fayetteville. We called him Doss. And what had happened was he had gone out there 20 years earlier to start a spiritual community. And it's a long story about how the land was grandfathered in, and I'll tell another time. But it was private land that had been grandfathered in when the wilderness preserve was created, but there was no road access or anything to it. It had been cut off. So he had gone out with another couple to start that, and they all didn't get along, and it fell apart as they were building a couple of cabins that never got finished. But there was a lot of supplies out there. They had gotten a water system in. They had a spring that ran year-round. There was like freeze hydrants and all kinds of stuff there, but nobody had lived there for 20 years. And so this is starting to come together, right?
Yeah.
So I was very interested, and the next day, now at that time the big thing online was discussion forums, pre-Facebook and all that, and there were by topics. You had your primitive skills forum, your country living forum, your gardening. I was on all of them at this point, and I had a habit, because I was getting down to business. I wasn't into chit-chat. People chit-chatting there, I'm not even clicking on that. But something odd happened the next morning. I went online to start researching about anything going on in Arkansas. And it was on some kind of, I forget, a form that had a lot of different things going on. But anyway, the title of it said, "Is anybody up for coffee?" The last thing I would ever click on, right? I mean, is that chit chat or what? But again, this guidance said, click on it. And I did. And I said, "Hi, I'm in LA, blah, blah, blah." And I told her I was getting ready to do this thing, going to the wilderness in Arkansas. Blah, blah. And it turns out she's in Arkansas. And so we start talking, and one thing she says, "Well, you need to move to Eureka." But anyway, that happened later. And so I tell her where I'm thinking of going. She says, "My best friend lives kind of by that wilderness. Here's her phone number. Call her up and find out all about it." And so I did. Dolores, and dear Dolores, if you ever see this, I love you. I called her up, and she lived right on the edge of the wilderness, and she knew all about it, and she knew all about Doss. And I said, "Please give me the scoop on Doss." And she said, "Well, he's a little bit odd, but he's got a good heart." And she told me the basic history of what had happened. And I kind of felt like I'd gotten the okay. And so I spent 6 months communicating with him, and soon discovered that he probably had Asperger's, and that's why he had so many problems finding people and keeping people, but he did have a good heart. And I thought, well, I can find people. I'm good at that. And so the next 6 months, I just decided I'm going to find people to go there with, right? So that's what I'm doing. Meanwhile, what made it a little bit easier was Y2K was coming up around the corner. And there were all kinds of people that were eager to go. And I, too, thought, man, that's a great deadline for me to get out of LA, is it not? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't imagine LA and something like that. And so I was busy. So anyway, at a certain point, I realized I just have to go. I didn't find the people yet. He said he had 3 people in Fayetteville that were interested in going if I went. So I went, "Okay, I'm going to go to Fayetteville." And I went to my little part-time job, and I told him what I was doing. And I knew what kind of shock waves it was going to set off. And I came back to work the next week, and they handed me $3,000. Because I knew I didn't have any money. And that was enough money for me to send 600 books to the wilderness. Well, 600 books to Doss's house. I wouldn't go to the wilderness without books. And to get my camping gear, and to buy the Hoods Woods primitive skills videos, which I watched over and over and over to get primitive skills. And I'm all about it now. And so then when I needed more money to get things together, those same people they gave me about $5,000. And so I decided, okay, it was at the end of December in 1998, and I thought, I'm going to take the bus to save money and stuff, And I didn't know what I was getting myself into at all with that. The LA bus station is huge. It's not like an airport at all. They speak a different language in there, and when you get your ticket and you try to find your gate, good luck. The people, this is back then, maybe it's changed, I don't know. But the people who are there supposedly to help you, I think somebody told them that they have to give people 1 minute only. And they talk really, really fast. So I buy my ticket, and I'm looking for the gate that says it's supposed to be on the ticket, and I can't find the gate. I find one of those helper guys, and I say, "Where's my gate?" And he kind of brushes me off and just says, "Well, that bus will get you to Arkansas." It wasn't the same bus that was on my ticket, but that bus will get you there. And it said it was going to New York, but I couldn't find my bus anywhere. So I thought, well, okay, here we go. And I got on the bus, And I looked around, and it was pretty empty still. And there was this nice-looking black guy with his little son. He had a kind of a beret. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go sit in front of those guys. And it was in the back of the bus. And as the bus filled, I discovered that the back of the bus is for the Boys from the Hood, going to New York and everywhere else for their Christmas and all that kind of thing. And the front of the bus is for everybody else. Well, I was in the back of the bus. And I'm so glad I was in the back of the bus, because those guys took care of me all the way, making sure I got to Arkansas. They were funny. I just loved them, and I have more stories about those guys, but I want to move forwards. But one of the things they told me, like they gave me hot tips. There are tips you need to know. One of the hot tips is the bus stops at fast food restaurants. And you have to really watch the bus when you get off and get your fast food, because when it's time for the bus to leave, it just leaves. And it will leave you at the fast food restaurant, and now you are living in whatever town that is. And it happened once where we took off, and there was a guy running really, really fast behind the bus. And those guys made sure I had a place to lie down, for it was 3 days' journey. So I had 2 empty seats next to me that I could lay down and sleep. I didn't know I would survive if I couldn't do that. And as you go along, you pick up more passengers. The bus driver, at a certain point, the only seats available were my 2 seats. And those guys were not going to let anybody have those 2 seats. So people would get on the bus driver and say, "We're not going anywhere till these people have a seat." And those guys would pipe up, "Yeah, baby, come on back here. We got a space for you, baby." You know, and like, and they'd start farting and burping and getting really loud and obnoxious. "Yeah, we got a place for you." Nobody wanted to come back there. So by the time we got into Oklahoma, one of them pipes up and he says, "We should be singing Kumbaya." I taught them about aromatherapy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we had the best time. It was wonderful. So we get to Fayetteville. I meet the people who were supposed to be going with me out to the wilderness. It's disappointing because one of them has bipolar disorder. Borderline personality disorder, and which is a really bad. I thought it just meant you almost have a personality disorder, but not quite. It's not like that at all. The other one was married to her and miserable in his life, but he was the woodsman and we needed him. And the other one was a computer guy who was a real sweetheart, but in no shape or anything to go to the wilderness, so didn't want to live there yet. So the idea was I was going to stay with a borderline personality, and I'll call her Katie, and are we running out of time?
No,
already?
just checking. 4 o'clock.
It's 4? Okay, well, I'll get you through this part of this. We're going to be backtracking. So I was going to stay with them. I did eventually find some more people to go out there with. I guess we'll have to pick that up later. I'm just going to tell you about the first time that we went out there. Jim and Dan, and Jim's the woodsman, we decided to go out there in December, at the end of December, and check the place out. So it's way out in the it's way out there, and you have to hike down a trail that is a trail for a ways, and then it stops, and it's washed out, and it's a dangerous gully that's really, really deep, so it's very difficult to get down. I get to the top of the mountain there, and I'm looking out, and it's awe. This is my backyard and my front yard, and there's nobody else here. Oh my God. And so we get down to where it was called the Sierra Club Cabin. It's not, we just call it that, but it's not, it doesn't belong to Sierra Club, but it's a beautiful cabin that belongs to a group of people that turned out to be good friends, who is across the creek. They don't live there, but they come and visit. It's that a vacation type thing. And you had to get to where I was going to be, you had to go through the Hurricane Creek, which was not easy because it's fast and in the winter it's very cold. And you have to go barefoot. But we go across there. The architecture was disappointing, unfinished, kind of like, they called them cabins, but they were very ramshackle. But it was nice because inside there was a wood-burning stove, and there were dishes, and there was even a gas stove with some propane, and there was water. You know, it's like you get there and you go, oh, thank God this is here. And so we decided that night, the garden area, there'd once been a garden area. I was going to have this as a 1 acre. We went out there to check it, and there were a bunch of sassafras trees growing. And there were huge bear tracks all over, and it had torn down some of the sassafras. We decided that we were going to go out in the middle of the night and sit out there just to watch to see what kind of wildlife was out in the garden area. We go out there, and there was a great big huge oak in the middle of it. It hadn't been overgrown with trees all that much yet. And we sat up against the tree, and we didn't say anything, we just watched. After a little while, this blue flashing light popped up and went over into the bushes. We're not saying anything. No, this is what I'm seeing, right? And then there's like kind of an orangey color light just going boop, doop. And you just keep watching in these different colored lights, and some of them were kind of square shaped. You couldn't really see a form in them. These lights were just coming up with different colors, and they were about 3 feet high and not quite on the ground as they were moving along. And so it's pretty interesting already. We were out there a couple of hours, didn't see any animals. Went inside, and Dan, who is a non-believer, never had any kind of paranormal or any kind of thing like that at all in his life, and computer guy, down to earth, you know, none of that woo stuff for me. We go into the cabin, and it just about falls over. Did you see that? Did you guys see that? And we all saw that. And so I was planning on doing like a Findhorn Pearlander type gardening out there, which uses those kinds of energy along with permaculture. So it was quite nice to have the welcome party show up for that initial interaction. The next day I went out alone to meditate out there to reconnect with whatever energies were here. Now, you'll hear sometimes people talk about the Deva that's in charge of the land. And Dawes had said there's a Deva that is kind of like the governance of this land. And so I thought, well, you know, clearly there are these energies. I probably should go out and introduce myself to the Deva. So I go out alone, and I'm sitting there meditating, and I open my eyes, and in kind of a neon blue color, floating about from where I am to where you are, is the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus. I am not making that up, and I'm looking at that and I'm going, I am not making this, I'm not imagining this. This is the last thing I expect to see. And I just sat there and looked at it for a while, and it's just stayed there. And my eyes are open. I am completely sober. And then it just kind of disappeared. Well, I've learned more about that since then. That'll be in the book and the story and all that sort of thing. I learned that the tribal peoples and the hunters and the hill people around there talked about where I was living as a place where strange things happen. Is about how it was described. And it was. There were many, many strange things that happened. And I think I have time for maybe one of the strange things that happened to me early on when I moved down there. I decided to live in the garden in a tent to introduce myself to the animals. And the idea was if I'm here all the time, they will kind of shy away. So I'm in the tent and you know how the forest sounds around here in the summertime, it's like a jungle. All of the animal sounds just so loud. I'm laying there at night and I'm listening to that, and I'm recognizing as a musician that this is a composition, this is an orchestra, this is music. There's rhythm, melody, all of it. It sounds a little bit like John Cage to me. And what was so shocking was, and it's 360 degrees all the way around, right? On a beat, they would all stop at the same moment. Not one voice was out of sync. Then, at a random time, everybody comes back. And it happened at odd intervals. It was like, not like a regular thing at all. And I would spend all night listening to that. And I thought, what would happen if there was a human voice in this? How would that fit? What would it sound like? Could a human know when to stop, when to start? There's a conductor, okay? There's got to be a conductor. That's the only explanation. If I were to start singing and find a way to kind of like not scare all these animals, make a voice that kind of fits in a little bit, could I detect, would the conductor notice me and say stop and start? And so I decided, well, might as well try it. But I have to tell you, the first night that I was going to do it, I was shy. I felt so shy. Like, what are they going to think? And am I going to ruin it for them? You know, am I going to just ruin the whole wilderness now? So I finally worked up the courage and I started singing. Yeah, they all shut up for a little while. But then they kind of realized that they had to teach a newbie, and they started up again. And for a few nights I just kept working with it and working with it. And one night I was singing along, and all of a sudden this feeling came to stop. And we all stopped together. And then the feeling, thank you, the feeling came to start. And we all started together. And I had been initiated at that point into the governing intelligence of the wilderness, which I just call the presence. I don't call it the deva or anything like that. I want to strip it of all concepts, make it as pure and clean as it can be. And I've studied the science behind it since then. I've taught classes on it, that nature has had broadband internet for billions of years. And we know how it works, and we know it's real, and we know there's an intelligence at work in all of this, organizing the whole ecosystem. And I had just gotten plugged in. And so from that point on, my life in the wilderness was a series of amazing events where I had these communications from the presence about doing things that people might say, she's been in the woods too long. When you're working in the garden and all of a sudden you drop your tools and run up to the top of the mountain as fast as you can for no reason. And you run, and the presence is saying, run faster, faster, faster. You're not going fast enough, and you run as fast as you can. And you know, if anybody else lived down here, they would lock me up. But nobody does, so I get to do this kind of crazy stuff. And I get to the top of the mountain, and lo and behold, at the top of the mountain, there's somebody parked that I had an incredibly important message for that there was no way for me to get a hold of. And there he was. And I gave him this important message. And he probably thought, where did she come from, you know? And then I went back down the mountain. So part of it was that when the presence talks to us, we have to listen. When the presence tells us do, we have to do, even if it's crazy. I went in there, I'm a student of everything. I'm a student of history, geopolitics, science, medicine, philosophy, communication skills, all of it. I want to know everything. And so, and I always study every day. I mean, that's just what I do. And I went into the wilderness with a lot of learning and a lot of ideas about how things work and about everything. I knew it all, right? And when I went in there, I had a knowledge crisis, and the interactions that you'll hear about, where the presence stripped it all away, cleared the slate, said, don't worry about all of those elaborate practices that you're doing. You don't need to do the Dakini poses. You don't even need to worry about the 4 directions. Just observe. Just listen. Just do. How easy is that, right? And so that became my life in the wilderness. And so you will learn in through the series, of course, yes, we will get into what I learned from the plants and the herbal medicine. And, it was hard on me physically, I'll admit. I had some serious accidents. I was malnourished. I know it aged me, but it was all worth it. Oh, what is this? It's you. You're just not in time.
Yes, it's in time for me.
I like your bunny outfit, though.
Bear.
Oh, bear outfit. Okay, that was close. Because you knew I was going to talk about bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm going to talk about bears in the future one. We've just gotten to the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just told him about how I got plugged in to nature's broadband and about the presence. And, but yes, I had a lot. Do we have time for one more story?
I think we're fine. 15.
Okay, I will tell you one bear story since the bear just arrived. This is going to be scattering through, weaving things in and out. So I did have this bear that was in the garden. It was the primo bear territory. The hurricane has the highest density population of bears in Arkansas. The alpha bear gets the best territory. The best territory was where I was living because it had peach trees, blackberries, grapes, water right there. It was perfect for the alpha bear. So that was what I had to deal with. And here I am in the garden in my tent, keeping the animals out because I'm present, right? They're going to all run away. So as you can imagine, at night I would hear the bear outside my tent with the cracking of the branches and all that kind of thing. And I've been reflecting on how to inform the bear that this is no longer his territory, it's my territory now, and he's not allowed in the garden. It was a strict rule of mine. No bears in the yard, no bears in the garden. And so it occurred to me, because I had been so tuned into the voice and how, and this interspecies communication that was going on, that what I needed to do was convey the message that way through sound and through the strength of my presence, and that would be communicated through the strength of my voice and my drum. And so I was going to one night leave my tent when I knew the bear was there, and I was going to play my drum and sing a power song to the bear. And through the power song, the bear would understand that I was now in charge of the garden, and he wouldn't come in the garden anymore. That's how it was supposed to go. And so I reflected on that for a while. And the bear kept coming around, and it's one of those things where you finally go, you know, gotta do it. But here's the thing, you can't be afraid. And if you're going to sing a power song, it has to be a power song, and you can't have like your little voice wiggling. You can't go, oh, I've got a little bronchitis thing going on. You know, it's got to be fully there and strong. And did I feel like that? Not really, but you know, you call up the power when you've got to. And so it was a full moon. I knew I had good visuals. I got out of my tent and I took my drum, and there was the bear. I would say he was about over by those cabinets. He was big, 500-pound male bear. And he's there, and so I faced the bear, and I began my power song, and it started off really good. I had the full everything, the drum. You know, drum helps you build your power up, and it was strong. I don't sing words; I just do vocal, like sound. And I was singing to the bear, and the bear likes it, and he sits right down. Nobody's ever sung to a bear before. Not that bear. He never saw that before. And because bears are curious, they like to have fun. They're really cool. So this bear is going to get serenaded, and he's up for it. And he sits down. And so I'm keeping up my power song, and I'm keeping it going, and I'm keeping it going. And I'm still keeping it going, like half an hour. We're going on to 45 minutes. And of course I'm having those little thoughts of like, how long can I keep this up? And I knew I couldn't falter, because if I did, the bear goes, she's a wimp. There's no power. This is my garden. So that was a bit challenging, but the power kept coming out. You know, I had doubts in myself, but this was coming from somewhere else, because I had tapped into the presence, and so that was moving through that broadband internet thing. The presence had agreed that this should be my space for the garden. It understood what I was going to do. I had brought the seeds for 200 different herbs to grow there, and all of these precious heirloom plants. And the presence wanted this garden, and I was going to do a little fairy sanctuary for all those little, whatever you want to call those things that were there, their own little place. And so it allowed that power to just keep coming through. And the bear finally got up and went into the woods, and that bear never came in the garden again. But he did come around the house, so then I had to start teaching him about the boundaries. And we had a good relationship where we had an understanding, and I could say, this, you can be here, but not here. And I learned how to train bears that way. And so when one bear would disappear and another bear would show up, it took about 2 months, and I would train the bears about what the boundaries were for, where they were allowed. It was so funny. One day, one of my favorite bears, Anna, she had just been learning all the rules, and I looked out the window one day, and I saw her put her paw out into the yard. Nobody was outside. And I'll tell you, they are rascals. But she put her paw out into the yard, and they went, hold it back. And there was nobody around to tell her to do that. She just knew, can't go in the yard. So lots of bear stories, cougar stories, all kinds of stories about that, about the herbal medicine, the hill people, all that still in this wilderness section. Then we'll go back into stuff about, what do you do when somebody's put a butcher knife across your throat, and what do you do when you get kidnapped by the mafia, and what do you do when you are, all that kind of stuff will come in bit by bit. What was life like in Hollywood? I was on the phone with all of O.J. Simpson's friends when he was driving down the highway. Little insider tips about backstory about things that people might be interested in Hollywood. So there's plenty. Obviously, it's going to take a long time to do this. It's going to be on YouTube, on the school's channel, in Facebook, eventually the book. And I thank you so much for coming, because if you weren't here, this wouldn't be happening. I will not talk into a machine. And obviously the writing isn't working because I never like what I'm writing. But when there are people around, it was like I see you nodding, I'm going, okay, they get it, they've been there, and they know what that's about. And so the energy just kind of flows between us, and it helps me to feel like, okay, this is a living story, and it's our story because it's all stuff that is part of our life here in this world. And it's important now, I think, to do it because there's a lot of, we're going through a big transition, and a lot of people are really scared and upset and angry and worried, and things are changing in a way they don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that comfort is needed, and I think people need to have a little faith that in this crazy, crazy world, that, it seems so chaotic, that there is what I call the presence. People ask me if I miss the wilderness. I say, no, how could I? The presence is everywhere. It's like you can never leave the wilderness. Once you've entered, you realize that it's all pretty wild. It really is all pretty wild. So, my friends, thank you. I think we're probably hitting our mark now, right? Mm-hmm. And I hope you come back. And if you can't, connect with me on Facebook. Check out, I have a bunch of videos on YouTube. I do my legacy is probably the Ultimate Herbal Database. You can see demonstrations of that on YouTube. It's where I am literally connecting all of the dots in Eastern, Western, and conventional medicine with permaculture and the history of herbalism and anatomy, physiology, and botany. And it's a one-stop place where you can go to do study, to get quick answers. I'm constantly adding new studies to it. And it's visual, so, in holistic medicine, the problem is you gotta see the whole, and we tend to just see a little tiny part. So in the Ultimate Herbal Database, it's visual, so immediately when you look at a topic, you see all of the key connections to it. The main phytochemicals over here in purple, what disorders it's known to treat with over here, all things like that, so that you can go down the rabbit trail if you want to, easily, or you can just stay focused. So I've been working on that for 15 years, because I wanted one place for everything. I started it for myself. I was tired of hunting through all of my books to try to find something. And so I've been putting it all together. Right now there are almost 28,000 topics. And each topic has videos and studies and articles and there's something like 200, last time I looked, 200,000 what they're called attachments. They're actually little tabs. It's like a browser that are in it. So it's made to take you deep or to give you the quick answer when you gotta have it. So I spend a lot. That's why I can't write it, because I'm doing that all the time. Anyway, please connect with me however you can, and if you can come again, I hope you do. And I want to know more about you and what you all are doing. So, if you're on. Let me give you my email address. It's easy. Some of you have something to write with. It's ozarkherbalacademy@gmail.com. So feel free to write to me. And if you join the Facebook group, we didn't have question time.
It's 4:30 and we're here technically
Okay,
till 5. So if we want to open up for questions.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to go to the restroom, and then if you want to hang out for a little bit, we can do. Let's do that.
Okay. Right. So this is the group that's going to ask you a bunch of questions. Hi, everybody.
We haven't signed any releases.
Okay, so I don't know their names.
Anonymous.
We had a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
Starting, you had some questions, right? Did you have
Yes,
some questions?
I was just wanting to know, to make sure, so I found that. Ozark Herbal Database, I found 2 of them.
Go to the one that's herbaldatabase.org. That's the best one.
What are the differences?
Well, here's what.
That's what I was telling you about the bathroom.
I thought that was you.
I thought somebody had some musical.
That was embarrassing.
The one that says Ultimate Herbal Database Online, I did that one first. And there was something, I think it was the internet company that I was with on that. I couldn't access it from home, and I had to go somewhere else to get on it to do anything. And there were a few other people that had problems like that too. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to do another one on a different server, and that one worked fine, but now I have 2 of them because a bunch of people had signed up and paid for membership on the first one, and they could access it. So now I have 2. I wish I didn't, but I have to leave it alone.
I know, I understand.
And so the herbaldatabase.org, I keep the first one updated. I mean, everything's updated, but I don't really add too much. I don't work with the first one too much. So on the right now, there's a 2-week free trial on the database, and that's going to end pretty soon, but I want people to have an opportunity to try it out. Be sure to look at the how to use page, and there's a tutorial, and I think it's pretty easy to use.
Do you do this all yourself?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess you learned that and got involved with all the tech stuff in LA.
No.
No.
Well, I mean, not really. No, I didn't know. No, I didn't. I taught myself once. I knew computers to some limited extent, and I had I guess you could call a mentor, not a mentor, but maybe. Justin Nolan, he's an anthropologist professor at the university here. He found out I was in the wilderness, and he would send some of his students out to talk with me about herbs and things like that. And there was a primitive skill school that he was involved with that started bringing people out to learn, to study with me and another colleague of mine, Kent Bonner. And so bit by bit, I had a small amount of solar power, and Justin Nolan bought me a little tiny EE PC that was minimal power. So I had an ability to use a computer.
Wow.
And I almost never left the wilderness, but when I did go into Fayetteville for a few days, I would go online, and I found some software online that I could use to start this thing. And it was, pretty basic back then. But so I had a little computer in the wilderness and a program and a little solar power, and I started it there.
Well, how long were you in the wilderness? Did you say 10 years?
10 years, yeah.
And did you continue to live in a tent?
No, there's a lot more to the story.
Okay.
I built, there's a whole lot more, but I'll just say this right now. My intention was to build a wigwam.
Yes.
I built a wigwam for myself. The other people involved, because I did get some other people to come in to create a community, they had a fit about the wigwam and wanted me to be indoors. And I finally caved in, and so did the wigwam. And although not with me in it, but yeah. So I moved into one of the cabins. We had one of the people that became part of the community had funds, and there was a building project that expanded one of the ramshackle cabins so that I actually had my own bedroom there. Yeah.
At the height of it, of the most people, how many people lived out there with you?
Well, living there, maybe 4, but there were people in Fayetteville that were going back and forth that wanted to live there someday once we had it all together and it was comfy. So, but it didn't last, you know. I don't know if there's a video on the schools on the YouTube that is a short video. I think it's called something about Words from the Wild or something like that. That property that I was on had been grandfathered in, and prior to the wilderness, it had belonged to a farmer who, when there was a road, you know, there had been settlers down there a long time ago. It was too rugged for most of them, and they all left, and there was only 1 or 2 left. And then when the wilderness took over, they closed the roads off, and those guys couldn't make it anymore. So it was the Claiborne property, and in that little short video, one of the Claibornes is talking to another professor that I got connected with to Save Seed about that property, and what he says there is that there were other people that went down there and tried to do it, but it was too rough for all of them, and she's the only one that could do it. And but to me, I was in paradise.
Did you have any issues with chickers?
No.
Where is this wilderness located?
It's the closest towns to it are Deer.
Okay.
You know, kind of the area.
I grew up in Newton County, so I was just
Oh,
curious.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Newton County,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so I know where Deer is.
Okay.
In your time, you know, in and around the wilderness, did you cross paths at all with the Ozark Society or Dr. Neil Compton?
No, but not that I know of. I did. Dr. Campbell. I don't know if you know Dr. Campbell he was a agricultural anthropologist at not the University of Fayetteville, but another one in Arkansas. He had me present at the Ozark Cultural.
Naturalist.
No, there was a symposium in Missouri at the university there. It was supposed to be annual, the Ozark Cultural something or other. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. So I did meet people there, but I don't know.
How old were you when you ultimately went out there?
48.
Oh, you went to the wilderness when you were 48.
You mentioned about malnutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because you didn't know what to eat, or there was
I didn't have access. It's like the food I was growing, I was foraging and all that kind of thing, but I did not have good fats. I had walnuts, but in limited supply. I grew evening primrose for the seed oil, but not enough. There were other nuts that I had, like hazelnuts and stuff. And for cooking oils, like people would bring me stuff, and that's another part of the story. Like when the creek was low, the people in Fayetteville would bring supplies to me that was not really like. They brought me olive oil, which I thought was olive oil, and I learned later that it's not olive oil. So I thought I was eating olive oil, but I was not. So that was
Trash oil.
that was a bad one. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of dried beans out there?
Mhm. I grew a lot. I grew everything. I grew teff, millet.
Mm-hmm.
I grew a lot of grains. I grew all kinds of squashes and relied heavily on squash, sweet potatoes.
Yes. I'm sure.
I grew a lot of heirloom corns. The problem with what I was doing was that I didn't have refrigeration,
Right.
and the seed, you have to keep growing it or you lose it. And I had a number of varieties that I couldn't grow at the same time because they would cross, and so it was a nightmare. And then there were times where I just really didn't feel up to growing all that much stuff.
Right.
But you have to, or you're going to lose it. And so that was a problem. And then, there was on the property, when they first started that community, they had brought a lot of long-term storage food out. So there were buckets, like 5-gallon buckets of sugar, salt, honey, beans, rice, white rice, whole wheat, not the flour, but whole wheat. I had a wheat grinder. And it was all like at least 20 years old in the heat. And, while it's supposed to still be good, beans don't last that long.
No,
I'll
they
tell you
don't.
that.
They don't get soft.
And so, a lot that I know about, if I'd had my druthers, I'm vegetarian, and I was vegetarian then, so I wasn't really getting the DHA that I needed, or the EPA, and and here's the big thing, and this I didn't learn till much later. The soil in Arkansas, and the Ozarks generally, Missouri too, is mineral poor. We have and it's because we skipped the last ice age and the glaciers didn't come over us. So here I was eating all this great food, and thinking all this organic food is going to just have killer mineral content. Well, it didn't. And it doesn't unless you add rock dust or something like. You got to amend your soils in the Ozarks. Yeah, I learned that. I taught a class at the Moonflower Herb Fest in Texas a couple years ago, and Paul Bergner gave a class there, and I'm so glad I went to that because he brought that up, and he said it's like in Peru, that both the Ozarks and Peru have the mountains in Peru have a similar problem with soil that has very low mineral content. And what they do in Peru, which I'm going to start doing, I haven't started doing it yet, but in order to help with that, they take a lot of horsetail, and they use a lot of horsetail extract in their herbal formulas. They add a little bit to just about everything, and when you get into the energetic side of things and the way the minerals can work in a bioenergetic way, it's used to accentuate what minerals are there and make them more
Is that in the
accessible.
soil or the food? You add the
No, in
horse
the herbal formula, like let's say this Lodelia
Yes.
is my formula, and it'll have some horsetail in it.
Would you do it like, let's say you fix greens, you cook some greens.
You could
put a
add.
little horsetail extract to it?
Yeah, you could do
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And it brings the minerals out of the lobelia or whatever it is.
Right. Although I don't know that they added it so much to their food, but to their herbs that they were taking. And so, with the food, these days I take a mineral supplement just to be sure. But
Right.
and when I'm going to be moving, and when I move again, I'm going to make sure that the soil. I'm going to be around Eureka, and that's a whole other story. But that the soil has the minerals in it that it needs.
Well, I'm asking because I had an accident in Los Angeles, horseback riding accident, and I had to have lots and lots of blood transfusions.
Okay.
And after that, I developed all these sensitivities, food sensitivities. So I'm very limited. I can't take any isolated supplements. I can't take many herbs. Anything that's isolated, my whole esophagus and my GI tract becomes inflamed, and autoimmune reaction. So I eat probably about 4 or 5 pounds of produce a day, and I have to eat everything. Fruit, I can only eat apples, but I can eat those raw, and avocados I can eat raw, and nuts and seeds raw, but I have to eat all my vegetables lightly cooked. And so we have a garden, but anyway, I don't, so I'm always trying to make sure I'm getting it from my foods by eating massive quantities.
So what you need to do, and if you go into the database,
Yes.
There's a huge section on gardening, including on how to test your soil and amend your soil and all that sort of thing. And what you're going to want to do is add, you want to test it first, and then add the minerals that are lacking. And
Okay.
that's where rock phosphate, although you have to be sometimes careful with that, green sand, things like that. I used to use a lot of the seaweed,
Yes.
but I stopped doing that just because I was concerned. I didn't know for sure that they were getting all the radiation out of it after the Fukushima business and the radiation in the ocean.
Right.
And so, but I used that on my plants traditionally, and if I knew that they were cleaning it properly, and it really, I don't know.
We use, what are the sea minerals we,
Well, it's not serum, azomite.
do you like azomite?
I think I have used that before. I don't have mine with me, but as I recall, I think that one's pretty
Yeah.
good.
From a company in Fayetteville, I've used paramagnetic.
Oh, from Nitron?
Yes.
Right, I have some of that stuff under my sink. It just makes everything grow.
Yeah.
Oh.
But sometimes things grow, but they don't.
Right, have some
Right.
minerals.
Yes, that's the thing, you don't know.
Right.
Although sometimes it's really bad, you will, but yeah, you don't know. So anyway, that I'm glad we got to that part, because here we are growing food we think has everything we need.
Right.
When you got into a malnutrition situation, did you get to the point where you had to go to a doctor, or did you take care of it yourself?
No, I wouldn't say that I got to that point of you wouldn't. The only way I know that I had got into malnutrition is just because I feel like I aged faster than I should have.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
And no, I always doctored myself, and I did have some serious injuries in the wilderness that I doctored myself with the herbs and stuff like that. But no, the malnutrition is just that. It's just like I feel like I aged too fast.
And you got to the point where you kind of knew what you needed to remedy that or mitigate
Well,
that?
not while I was in the wilderness, because I had already my limit. I'd reached my limit of what was available to me
Okay.
and what I could do, because when I was living alone, that's a lot of work. See, that was the other problem. I was like, didn't get all the nutrients I needed, and I was working my butt off.
Yeah.
7 days a week. And, because I was also foraging
Yeah.
and doing, just everything. Carrying rocks around and hiking up and down the mountain with heavy backpacks. So What was your question?
Well, it was just about you instinctively knew, how to mitigate your symptoms or what you needed
Oh.
to eat or find or use.
Best you
Obviously,
could, I
you needed
guess.
to burn a lot of calories, or you were burning a lot of
Yeah,
calories.
yeah, I was, yeah.
But there
I
was
knew there was things that I needed that I wasn't getting, and I couldn't get. And, but, that's kind of like something we're all dealing with. There's a lot of things we
Yeah.
are getting that we don't want to get.
But you didn't get that, you don't have the shakes from not getting enough DHA,
Oh, no.
EPA.
No.
So you must have been, you had some amount to keep that from happening.
Yeah, I think, but a lot of that isn't, I don't have any symptoms of that. Or, I'm actually really healthy.
Do you have,
But-
did you have a strong constitution to start with?
No, I'm the one that's not going to make it in the wilderness, remember?
Right.
No, I was not an outdoors person. Although I grew up that way, as my mother was a horsewoman, and I grew up in Colorado, learning how to ride wild horses and stuff like that. But that scared me to death, those wild horses. You
I bet.
did it all wrong. Had to be bareback and had to be wild horses. And I didn't like it. My sister turned into a jockey, but not me. I turned into, I'm not doing those falling down sports.
Right.
Yeah,
I had my share of them.
so, no, although I worked out a lot when I was in LA,
Mm-hmm.
I worked out a lot. I was in the gym. I worked out 4 hours every day.
Wow.
7 days a week. But that stopped when my money ran out and I was doing when I made that shift. Then it was like I was doing a lot of sitting and putting on weight, getting out of shape. So when I went into the wilderness, I was really pretty out of shape.
Wow.
Got in shape pretty fast. In fact, I was thinking that could be a money-making business,
Yeah.
You want to lose weight?
Get
Come on.
Without the pizza.
Oh, no pizza, no. Yeah.
So did you just kind of live on, when you first got there, when there was no garden to speak of, did you just kind of forage and eat some of the stuff that was there? Or?
Well, it took a while, I had to carry stuff in on my backpack.
Yes?
So it's like, it would take me about, because the trail was so dangerous and it wasn't even a trail, it could take about 3 hours to hike up the mountain to the top. When you got to the top of the mountain, there was a road. No phone service or anything like
No
that up there.
electricity, nothing.
Oh, there was electricity because there was a couple of houses, but they didn't have any kind of phone service. If you hiked a mile down the road, there was a house, and it had electricity, but there was no. It was way out there. But there was a place where a car could park, and so sometimes people would if I knew in advance there'd be somebody there if I had to get out, I could hike up and get in the car. Or people would bring supplies that they thought I needed, and they could create a cache for me at the top of the mountain. So I wound up with a dog. That's a beautiful story I'll tell another time. And I wound up with guineas. That's a beautiful story I'll tell another time. They needed food,
Yeah, I was wondering about them.
and I had to hike all that down on my back. So I made myself a no-wheel drive. I had a cache, and they would bring it all at once, so it was like I would have 500 pounds of dog food to hike down the mountain. Eat. And my no-wheel drive, I remembered how the women, the Native Americans, had these travois. And so I made myself a travois, and I made it so it fastened around my waist. And I put a rear view mirror on it for the bear patrol, because you're going to be hiking down the mountain with 500 pounds with dog food.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
got to have a rear view mirror for your bears. And I had, and I put on there a little refreshment station because it's a long trip. I had it all decked out. It was beautiful, and I called it my no-wheel drive. And so I could put like 25 pounds or whatever on that and get it in the mountains. And I did that for a while until it was really knocking my hips out.
I bet. Well, how did you keep the bears from getting the dog food when you got home?
I had a rear view.
But
Oh,
at your house.
I took it inside. No, but I trained my bears not to.
Oh, that's right. They wouldn't cross that perimeter.
They couldn't come
Yep.
in the yard.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But between the top of the hill and the yard,
Did they
Yeah.
come around following you?
No, no, they didn't. I was fortunate they did not do that. I had a pretty good understanding with them. In the beginning, there was some scary things going up the mountain, but no, in fact, a short little quick story that's so cute. The bears come and go for some reason, and every time I would get a new bear, I would have to start overtraining it. 2 months, 24 hours a day, you have to be on top of it. So anyway, my bear had disappeared, and I had a new bear, and this was a young bear, maybe a couple years old. Cutest little guy. And I'm training him to stay out of the yard. Now, it was a male, and the male bears will kill the younger male bears. One night, I wake up to at this time, now I have 2 dogs, howling, and they never do that, and whining, they never do that. And I listen, and I could hear down the creek the most god-awful sound of bears roaring and fighting. And I heard that sound coming closer and closer and closer. And I'm going, oh no, no bears in the yard. And so I go out on the landing, and I could hear them coming up to the yard. And I'm standing there ready to get after them. And they get up there. They're beautiful the way they move. They're silhouettes, they're like ballerinas. It's my little bear trying to get away from the big bear that's going to kill him. And he knows if he can just get to the yard, I'm going to take on that big old bear, and he's going to be able to get away. Smart little guy. That's what happened. He got to the yard. I was out there getting after that other bear in a second, because timing's everything. And you have to be big and bad, and like they don't know. It's always the big bad screaming banshee cougar woman. And that little bear got away, and that other bear just turned around and it's like, I'm out of here. Yeah, they were fun. I have a lot of really fun bear stories, a lot of animal stories and plant stories too.
wow.
So how often do you all plan to do this here?
Once a month.
Okay.
I may do some elsewhere. It depends on how long it's taking to get through all this. Obviously, it's a long story, and I've skipped around already a lot of. There's some juicy little things in there that you guys haven't heard that somehow have to get back into it. Yeah, but I'll tell you, I want to live in that wilderness the rest of my life.
Why did you leave?
The wilderness made me leave. And the presence made me leave. Towards the end of my stay, people would come down, like the outdoorsmen, the tough guys would come down. Wilderness guides would come down, not often, but they'd come down. And the first thing they would ask me is like, aren't you afraid? And they would say, I'd be afraid if I was doing it, I'd be afraid. And that was a real theme for me. Everybody was afraid of the wilderness. And because I knew the presence, and I was talking, it's like I had this whole connection with it. It was taking care of me. And I could see how there were times where it made me go help wounded animals that were in trouble. And it was like we were all a big team, and there was it wasn't like this horrible killing spree. It was like cooperation was the main theme. If you're hooked in to the presence and you're part of it and you're following the rules, observe, listen, do, then it's like the only time I was afraid was when somebody made me do carpentry work. But that was not a problem. Where was I going with that? What was your question again?
Why did you leave?
Oh, why did you leave? So, towards the end, it was like the whole experience was so absolutely awesomely beautiful, like a fairy tale, like
I'm sure.
an unbelievable paradise, and I was the only one there to enjoy it. And I thought, oh my God, all these people are so afraid. And I've been given this gift, and I feel selfish keeping it to myself, knowing all this.
Yeah.
And I really should somehow go out, and I felt the presence wanted me to tell them it's not the way they think. The world is not the way they think. And I'm going, okay, I will someday when I write a book. But I'm not leaving the wilderness. I refuse. It's like, I don't know how it's going to happen. I'm not leaving. And I should have known better because I'd seen it over and over and over again. And that's the whole long part of this story. When it's time for somebody to leave the wilderness, and in life itself, when it's time for a change to happen, and you know it, if you don't do it, life is going to make you do it.
Right.
And that's what happened. I wasn't going to go, so the presence, the life, whatever, arranged for an incredible disaster, which will be part of the book later on. We got to save some of it for the
Yeah,
end.
that's a good cliffhanger.
An incredible disaster where I had to flee for my life.
I'll have to come back.
Well, why do you think you didn't get to chiggers? I haven't always had chiggers, but ever since I had this accident with all the autoimmune
It is
stuff,
interesting.
I've had a lot of parasites,
Mhm.
a lot. I mean, they couldn't even believe all the stuff I had in me, and chiggers, and it's like they all work together. And like Mark doesn't have all these chiggers. He can go out in the garden and everything, but I mean, I can't
Well,
even.
after I left the wilderness, I got jiggers.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think it was sort of a protection thing or a cooperation thing while you
I
were
think
there?
it was more balanced there, maybe. You know.
In the wilderness.
Mhm.
Those little creatures at night kept it going for you.
Something did.
You get a lot of ramps.
That's
He eats lots of garlic and hot peppers, and so he.
I do eat a lot of garlic
yeah.
and hot peppers. I grew those, and of course,
Yeah.
I lived on cayenne practically.
That might have been why you didn't. Do you eat as much of it now? That was my.
Did you ever put cayenne pepper in your socks to keep your feet warm?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
It's pretty cool.
Yes, yes. That was,
Does it sting your skin?
No, I mean, you didn't mind.
Just makes it warm.
Yeah.
Very more like hot.
another good one is mullein in your shoes.
The leaves, the fresh leaves.
The dried.
The dried?
Yeah. I guess you could use the fresh, but yeah, good.
Now, I did something that the way I got rid of I had all kinds of things, parasites, Bartonella, Mucor. I mean, it was unbelievable. And they don't know if I got it from the blood transfusions or where it
Right.
came from. But anyway, I finally ended up sending my blood and stool samples to a medical doctor in Africa who used to be a tropical disease specialist in the United States, but he was from Nigeria, and he went back and started a medical school over there, and he has a lab. And so they don't test for these things in the United States, so their tests aren't accurate. So they test over there by using the microscope, and they culture things and do all this stuff to coax it out, and then they look. It's not some kind of computer-driven thing. Trained people look, and they recognize this stuff. And he treats with they do in their lab, they go get plants from equatorial Africa. They cultivate some of them, and some of them are wild. And they get them. I have a list of the herbs, but they juice them. They fresh juice them, and then I guess they pasteurize them in some way, or so that they have a 7-month shelf life. And they ship them over to a doctor in Albuquerque, and then he disseminates them to people. But I couldn't believe this stuff. This was the most amazing stuff. I had to take it for like 3 weeks. I had 5 different plant juices that I would have to do. Didn't have any sensitivity issues with any of it. And I have not ever, I don't think I've ever felt so good in my life as I felt when I took, towards the end of that, when I took that stuff. It was unbelievable.
You know, in Herbal Knowledge Keepers, a few months ago, there was a woman who I think was talking about that. She was mentioned this whole thing about this doctor in Africa and his stuff, and how she had been using it. And I tried to get her to tell us more about it, like how do you connect with it?
Well, I have all the information.
Oh, would
very
you?
Expensive. He's very, I mean,
Well,
the plant juices are $10 an ounce, and I had to use almost 300 ounces of them. So
yeah, but still, it's good to know.
the tests are not that expensive. The tests
I
are around
would
$800.
put it all in the database. So people
Okay,
know
I'll get
about
that
it.
information to you.
Okay.
Because I have it all. I have the list of herbs, and so you can, you know, I've got everything.
Great.
But of course, it also has to do with where they're grown. And if they're grown in equatorial Africa, you know, this stuff is some nutrient dense stuff that you're. But it didn't taste that bad. One tasted like a feedlot smells. But it didn't taste that bad because it wasn't any bitterness to it. It just you drink it and it tasted like a feedlot smells, and that was a kind of a strange. Remember that one, Mark? It was sort of strange, but it was very. I mean, as I said, just amazing stuff. Amazing, and it
Well,
knocked
that's good
out.
to know because that's what she was saying, and you know she's the only person I'd heard about it at all from. It's good. to
It
know.
knocks it all out in 3 weeks, like mucormycosis, which is horrible. That's what people got in Joplin after the tornado and kills people. It's a horrible fungus that's terminal. I mean, horrible death that you have from it. And I had that, and the Bartonella, which comes from ticks and black flies, I believe. These are things that they have really a hard time getting rid of.
Yeah.
I took one treatment for it for about 5 or 6 days. Gone, just gone.
Fabulous.
I mean,
Good to know. Yeah, you know, and if you join on
I will.
Facebook, join Herbal Knowledge Keepers group,
yes, I will.
and please tell everybody about that
I
because
will.
that's the idea. It's like it doesn't matter whether we're new or old to this. Everybody has a little piece of the puzzle. That's why it's a community art.
I want to see if I've already done this. Let's see, herbal.
Knowledge Keepers group.
We're
It's
past
private.
5.
Okay.
Oh, darn.
Oh, I can't say another word.
Okay,
Well,
Thank you.
is there
You're welcome.
is there anything that you want to say to wrap this up? Like you left us on a great cliffhanger. You've shared with us, just to review, you shared your website, you shared how to get in touch with you, you shared about your database, about the game. You pretty much have, right? Is there another piece of it?
Yes. Well, just to say that it's really important for us all to support each other in community. And we can do it online, we can do it in different ways, but don't be shy about sharing your part of the story. You know, things that have worked for you or didn't work for you. That's because that's really important. It's kind of what we remember. We don't remember the facts and figures so well. We don't remember all of that data. But when we hear a story about, this, like what you just said, we're going to remember that, you know? And so we need to be, or if we did something that didn't work, together if we figure out, well, why didn't that work? Let's dig into this. Because just isolated out on our own, trying this little thing, and
Yes.
now I'm going to try this.
No, it's well.
and you don't know if it worked for somebody. It's like you suggest something, they try it, and they go off and you don't hear from them. You don't know if it worked
Right.
or it didn't work. You know, and so we're just isolated in our own little worlds, using things that we have read or, you know, whatever are going to be good for us. But if we know 10 people who swear by lobelia for
Right.
asthma, you know, as soon as you start, you saw how I was taking this as I was
Mhm.
going along. It was starting to get that irritated kind of thing. If I hadn't taken it, I would have had a coughing fit and couldn't breathe. I don't have asthma, but I think I developed kind of like a mild allergic asthma from that infection.
It happens.
But, you know, it's like, if nobody knows about this, or they've read about it and forgotten it, but if they see it on Facebook,
Right, the
me
authority.
telling the story and seeing me use it as I start to get to where I'm going to cough, and I don't have a coughing fit, because it's in the story format. We're sharing what's in our personal lives face to face or face to camera. It's like it sinks in, and we need more of that. And it's uplifting. It's like, for one thing, it's what makes us feel like, you know, we're in a family. We're in the human family. It's like that sharing and that nurturing, taking care of each other. Not by going, are you okay? You look so weak. And, not like that, but just through sharing our stories with each other. So that's, I guess that's what I want to close. And we'll have another session next month. If I do some at the library or the natural food store or someplace, it's going to be a continuation of the story is the thing. I'm not going to do this part again. It'll be recorded, it'll be online. I'm going to continue the story, picking up sort of where I left off, but I left out some things. I'll go back. I need to tell you about the people that came to the wilderness
Yes.
with me and how all of that went.
The borderline personality person.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and I was the manager. It's because I was the one that started putting it all together. But anyway, so yes, there's much more, and then we'll pick up other amazing parts of the whole long story. So I thank you again for coming. I hope you come back. We're going to have the round table here in a little while, so we're going to, aren't we?
Yes.
Can everybody come?
So are there new people coming for
Yeah, the round table is regular. It's like a membership thing where I've selected people to be permanent. It's like ideally a lifetime membership,
Oh, wow.
and
But they're all herbalist.
it's a mixed group. Zach is one. They were going to come. They're probably watching it online.
Yeah,
Because-
one of them is, I see that Mary is watching
Yeah.
me right now.
They are coming for the evening, and it was just too long of a day, so they'll be watching it elsewhere. But it's a mixed group, which I love, because that's the other thing. We need different different specialties talking with each other. So we've got our wonderful veterinarian there who does Chinese medicine and herbs with animals, who is fabulous, acupuncture and everything. That's Zach, if some of you don't know him. And then we've got a naturopath, another Chinese herbalist and acupuncturist, a woman who is a health coach, but she's opening up a new apothecary here in Fayetteville. We've got a young fellow who's kind of getting started, but his goal is to get into conservation of endangered plants, the herbs in particular. We've got another health coach, and someone else whose skill set ranges from massage to aromatherapy and manages a health food store here. And who am I leaving out?
You have an
Oh, these two
You have
guys.
an anthropologist that understands
Yes,
Yes.
yes, these two guys, thank you. Pridham, anthropologist interested in ethnobotany. Maria, previously midwife, still teaching that, now has a line of herbal products aimed towards women and all of their varied, and she's put them through the test because as a midwife she's seen a lot and used a lot, knows what works. So now that's where she's moved to. You see all these herbs over here, and she's got more in the back. Nutritionist who used to be a nurse. A couple of people that were nurses and have moved on into the health field. We are looking for one more person, and so I'll just put the word out there. The intention is for this to be like a solid group where we have created a continuous learning program with each other and have fun and build our skills so that we all become just better and better and better all the time.
And that group meets at what hours and how often?
It meets here from
What time? 6? 6 to 8:30 or 6 to
we
9?
start with a potluck at 6 and talk. Then we start playing the game at 7:30. And in the game, there's like, you have a bunch of tiles, and you pull a tile out of, we have teams, you pull a tile out of the bag, and it might say something like sugar, and you put it down the table. Next guy pulls a tile out, and it says berberine. And can they explain the connection between berberine and sugar?
Oh, wow. That would be
And-
interesting,
And
eh?
how it relates to inflammation.
And it's right now, inflammation is the focus. And if they can, then they get a point, which is a token. And there can be challengers, so the other teams can challenge them. And it keeps going like that, and you keep building it and building it and building it and making all these connections. And then the winning team gets to choose the new tiles for the next game.
And you guys write these things up on the tiles, or that's...
It's already made. I made the game, and every time
I
there's
see.
new ones, I make new tiles.
I see.
So we have 3 new tiles for this game. DMSO. Do you remember what they are?
TMS says something else for the heart. Something about for the heart. And then a Chinese herb that I didn't get to even look up yet. Zach's going to have his advantage. Amy picked it.
I think it's
Huang-
Coronapsis maybe?
Huang, Chinese golden thread. Huang Ling, I think is the Chinese name.
I normally spend Friday night, Pridham and I spend Friday night hitting the books. Like legit, that database. That's our date night Friday night. We get some Thai food. We hit the database. We show up, get ready to play this game.
They're
But
very
last
good.
night we didn't do that.
Yeah.
We did have Thai food, but we didn't.
Yeah. And then homocysteine.
Homocysteine.
Yeah, so how does homocysteine connect to sugar? How does homocysteine connect to Chinese golden thread? You know, and it just goes on. And the more connections you can make, the more tokens and points you earn. And there's wild cards in there, like you have to give a token away to another team, or you can take one.
I think there's more than one of those tiles in there, or I happen to just pick it like 2 times
There's only
in the
one.
last
You
game.
picked it because you put it back in the bag.
Yeah.
And you can-
I picked that one twice.
So we have a lot of fun, and that's really what it's all about. You have to have fun. You have to play. Adults need more playtime,
True.
and we learn best if we're playing. So, and that's how I like to teach, is through exploring and playing and letting people, providing the playground for people to let their curiosity take them wherever it is they want to go. You know, if you're interested, you're going to learn and remember. So you guys, that's your homework assignment till next time, is go out and have fun and play. Play with your healing. You know, and just enjoy it, because it's a whole other level when we learn to play with our suffering and our pain, but it can be done. And that's going to all be in the book. One of my favorite sayings from the Buddha is, Pain is unavoidable and necessary. Suffering is optional.
I like it.
Maybe those are good words to end on.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.